Hello, everyone. I'm Mariana, the Marketing Coordinator for Firearms Legal Protection, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. By now, if you have watched a couple of our webinars, I'm a pretty familiar face, but you might notice we have two new guests with us today. Since this is their first time on our webinars, I'm going to share a little info about them. We have with us attorney Jason S. Downs and Mr. Tyler Murphy. Attorney Jason Downs works in Space Coast, Florida, where he is managing partner of Murphy and Downs Law Offices, PAs in Melbourne, Florida. He is a member of the FACDL, the NACDL, and the National College of DUI Defense. Mr. Downs has authored hundreds of successful dispositive motions and is the author of dozens of prevailing appeals in all levels of the Florida court system and in the Supreme Court of the United States, and has been published 4 times in peer-reviewed law journals. He's admitted to practice in all Florida courts, the Federal District Court of Middle District of Florida, and the Federal Court Appeals Federal Court Circuit, not a circus. Mr. Downs.
It's a circus.
It is. I guess at times it can be. Mr. Downs also represents clients in all misdemeanor and felony cases ranging from DUI arrests to serious felonies. He was also named Super Lawyer and Rising Star by Thomson Reuters and is rated 10 Superb by AVO and Top 100 Trial Lawyers for Florida, which these are all some of the many reasons we are excited to have him part of this month's webinar topic. And to top it off, his firm proudly represents some of our FLP members along with the East Coast of Florida. And with him presenting today is Mr. Tyler Murphy. He is the lead law clerk for Mr. Downs' law firm, and he is currently in his last semester of law school. Tyler is an expert with firearms law, firearms trust, and ATF licensing. Besides being a feature lawyer, he owns Dakota Ammo, which is an ammunition retail business where he supplies law enforcement and private citizens with American-made ammunition. So make sure to check out his retail business if you're down in Melbourne, Florida. The link will be in the description below. But both Mr. Downs and Murphy have a great amount of experience, which is why we're excited to have them on this webinar to share their knowledge on forced reset triggers and some other legally questionable triggers. But thank you again, everyone, for joining in to watch this month's webinar over forced reset triggers. Many are convinced that these triggers are machine guns, but let's get into breaking down the different types of triggers, the definition of an actual machine gun, and even more. Now, here comes the part our viewers are really here for, which is the topic of today's webinar. But I'll pass it on to you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Ariana.
You're welcome.
It's an honor to be here, folks. I'm a big fan of firearms legal protection. I've worked with the company for a while, and they're great folks, and they offer a great product. So I'm just going to start by just kind of letting everybody know, giving you a heads up. While I'm going to do my best to provide you with as much guidance as I can, by the end of this webinar, you're probably still going to be confused about the law, just like the rest of us, because it is really confusing. The ATF has done an amazing job of being as vague and ambiguous as they possibly can, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So I'm also going to give you a little bit of a heads up. As a lawyer, I love to talk. I hate reading from lists, but there's so much information packed in here, and there's so many little citations that I'm going to be giving you from the ATF letter that a lot of the stuff is going to be read from a list. So I'm giving you my apology as early. So, first, the laws that are governing this issue are the NFA, which is the National Firearms Act, and the GCA, which is the Gun Control Act of 1968. So together, those two acts, those two statutes or codes, they regulate the licensing and distribution and possession of firearms in the United States. Specifically, the GCA made it illegal for anyone to transfer or possess a machine gun manufactured after May 1986. And of course, they incorporated the definition of machine gun from the NFA, which is 26 U.S. Code 5801 and 18 U.S. Code 9023, subsection A, subsection 23. And I promise you that's going to be the last time I bore you with legal citations. We also need to keep in mind that there's another act out there that they maybe misled us in the nomenclature. It's the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986. We call it FOPA, F-O-P-A. FOPA also banned all machine guns made after May of 1986 for non-LEOs and non-government employees. So essentially, when you put these laws together, you and I are not allowed to own a machine gun unless it was made before 1986 or May of 1986, and then only if we have an FFL/SOT, which is the Special Occupational Taxpayer License. That makes an exception as to what we can own that's made after that. But essentially, you've got to have that special FFL/SOT to own a machine gun, especially if it was made after May of 1986. So let's talk about a couple of definitions here as far as the federal government's concerned. So first and foremost, we have firearm, which we all know what a firearm is. But to be specific, what the federal government classifies as a firearm is essentially something that shoots a projectile which is powered by an explosive. So that's not going to encompass air rifles, pellet guns, paintball guns, or anything like that. It's essentially going to cover anything that fires a bullet that was propelled by some kind of an explosion. The next definition we need to talk about is the most important one tonight. That's a machine gun. So essentially, the government, they've been back and forth over the years, and they've really chiseled away and added and taken away and then added again some different terminology. But here's what they say now. Machine gun is any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading with a single function of the trigger. Now, that term with a single function of the trigger is going to be really important. We're going to talk about it a little bit more as we go. Now, they also say that the term machine gun shall include the frame or receiver of any such weapon, any part designed and intended solely and exclusively, or a combination of parts designed and intended for the use in converting a weapon into a machine gun, and any combination of parts from which a machine gun can be assembled if such parts are in possession or under the control of a person. So that's a lot of verbiage. The plain language definition is if it fires more than one bullet for every single function of the trigger, it's a machine gun. Also, if it is a part, excuse me, if it's a part, accessory, component, it could be this pen. If it's a single piece of equipment that can make a gun fire more than one bullet with every single function of the trigger, it's still a machine gun. So even though this pen itself is not a firearm, if this pen, when inserted into a firearm, made that firearm fire automatically, this would be considered a machine gun under the law. I know it's stupid, but that's the way the law is written. Now, also importantly is the term automatically. So the law says that automatically means that the weapon fires repeatedly, again, with a single pull of the trigger. So all that verbiage is really important when we're talking about what's going on here tonight, which is really this precursory ban of forced reset triggers, which we call FRTs. So first, let's talk about bump stocks. Everybody's familiar with bump stocks. After the Las Vegas mass shooting, whoever you want to blame for that, bump stocks became the kind of the forefront issue when it comes to firearms ownership. So President Trump just basically said, I'm going to let the ATF ban bump stocks. Nobody needs a bump stock. And that might be true, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But really what a bump stock did is it allowed more than one shot with a single pull of the trigger. And the way it did that was you pull the trigger, and then as the weapon fires and the recoil moves the gun forward, your finger stays in the same position, and the gun continues to fire because of that bump stock. This was essentially an equipmentized version of the old belt loop technique, which I don't recommend anybody go out and try. But there's a lot of YouTube videos if you want to learn about it. Again, the belt loop technique. But essentially what bump stocks did and the belt loop technique, what they do is they allow somebody to fire more rapidly than a gun is designed to fire. And isn't that what all of us want, right? Since semi-automatic weapons became a thing, we've all looked for ways to make them more semi-automatic or fire more rapidly within the confines of the law, of course. So bump stocks, should they be banned? Maybe. That's not really up to me, and I really don't have an opinion either way. I'm kind of torn on bump stocks. I don't like any weapons bans, period. I don't think the government should be infringing on our Second Amendment rights, period. But when we look at these legal definitions, you've got a single function of the trigger, and the gun continues to fire as long as your finger stays back. Yeah, a bump stock probably qualifies as a machine gun under the law. The big problem with the banning of the bump stock is that specific ban set a really ugly precedence. It allowed the federal government to ban an item that should be protected under the Second Amendment based on arbitrary and erroneous interpretations of already codified definitions. So we have this separation of powers, right? Like we have the federal government, the houses of Congress. They go in, they make these laws, and we empower this agency, the ATF, to regulate and enforce those laws. But we don't empower them to create law, right? We empower them to enforce the law based on reasonable interpretations. And what happened with the bump stock ban was that they got to go in and rewrite these interpretations and these definitions. And that's why I don't like the ban on bump stocks, is because it set this ugly precedence. And now we're seeing the result of that ugly precedence. So the next really big thing here were binary triggers. So binary triggers are a little bit different than anything else. And my personal opinion is that they're dangerous. What a binary trigger does is it shoots when you pull the trigger, but it also fires another round when you let go of the trigger, right? So we have the binary action there. We pull, it shoots. We let go, it shoots. This is a dangerous operation for a lot of reasons, but just common sense will tell you that, if I fire one round, what if I don't want to fire a second round? In order to safely put my gun back into safe, I've got to drop the mag. I've got to eject. I've got to make sure that my chamber's clear before I can let go of the trigger. That creates a lot of dangerous circumstances, right? So binary triggers, they've been around for a couple of years. There's a lot of manufacturers that are making them. There's a lot of websites that tell you how to make them on your own. And so, because of this dangerous operation, you'd really think that the ATF would glom onto those. Well, they started to. But then the ATF apparently, they viewed the pull and the release of the trigger as two distinct trigger functions. So they haven't really attacked the binary triggers. They started to, but when they got into the interpretation of the law that some genius over there at the ATF is reading, they really decided that this is one function of the trigger and this is another function of the trigger. And we're going to talk about trigger functions a little bit more in detail here in a minute when we talk about FRTs. But because of that, they really haven't gone after the binary triggers as much as we would have expected. It creates a little bit of a gray area, though, because when they filed their letter that they sent out banning FRTs, they lump binary triggers in with the FRTs, and they're saying that some FRTs are binary triggers, which is just really weird because they're two totally separate things. But anyways, binary triggers, they excited a lot of shooters. And so that excitement inspired companies like Rare Breed Triggers to go out and design something that functions in a similar way, but that was safer to operate. And that brings us to the FRTs. So FRT stands for Forced Reset Trigger. And essentially what it does is after you've fired, it forces your trigger forward into the reset position. So all semi-automatic weapons have the same 8-step cycle of operation. The FRT is no different. There's an 8-step cycle of operation. And folks, if you've seen the YouTube videos, you've probably heard of the rubber band technique. So the rubber band technique is essentially where you take a rubber band, you wrap it around the rear of your trigger up towards the mag well, and when you fire, it forces the trigger forward into the reset position in a more rapid manner. It's essentially what an FRT is, but it's mechanized. They've made a mechanism that makes that happen. So essentially, all semi-automatic triggers reset in the same way by using a light spring mechanism. They have to reset in order to shoot a subsequent round. All semi-automatic weapons are the same way. They have to do that. They have to reset into the forward position before you can fire a subsequent round. And that's really what the ATF's talking about when we're talking about the pull of a trigger. Well, the FRT forces the trigger to reset more quickly than a traditional spring does. And it does that by utilizing the bolt carrier group to augment the reset procedure. So, if you imagine a little tiny spring pushing the trigger forward after you fired a round, well, now you've got the FRT that has the force of the bolt carrier group moving forward, pushing that trigger back in the reset position in a much more rapid manner. So what this does is it allows you a quicker follow-up shot. But you have to keep in mind that the trigger still has to be reset and pulled a second time by the shooter for another shot. Now, by contrast, a fully automatic weapon will continue to fire without the trigger having to be reset and without a subsequent trigger pull. So the force reset trigger, you pull, trigger's force forward, and you have to continue to pull for it to fire. A fully automatic weapon, you pull the trigger, there is no reset, and it continues to fire. So this brings us to what the ATF did back in March. So on March 22nd of 2022, the ATF sent out a letter. They entitled it an open letter to all federal firearms licensees. Now, this is interesting because it's not to possessors. It's not to resellers, wholesalers. It's not to websites that don't need FFLs to sell certain gun parts. They only address this to federal firearms licensees. And that's really important here because all laws that are enforceable require notice, right? We have to be put on notice. We have to know that it's illegal before we can be accused of doing something illegal. So I'm gonna give you some bullet point quotes from this letter that was sent out. Some FRTs are firearms and machine guns as defined by the NFA and machine guns as defined by the GCA, being marketed as replacement triggers for AR-type firearms. Unlike traditional triggers and binary triggers, which are sometimes referred to as FRTs, which is wrong, but that's what they say, the subject FRTs do not require shooters to pull and then subsequently release the trigger to fire a second shot. Instead, these FRTs utilize the firing cycle to eliminate the need for the shooter to release the trigger before a second shot is fired. By contrast, other FRTs, so apparently these are the FRTs that are not subject to the ban, but they're not really clear on that. By contrast, other FRTs also incorporate a disconnector or similar feature to ensure that the trigger must be released before a second shot may be fired and may not be a machine gun. Some FRT devices allow a firearm to automatically expel more than one shot with a single continuous pull of the trigger. Therefore, FRTs that function in this way are a combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun. The ATF's position is that any FRT that allows a firearm to automatically expel more than one shot with a single continuous pull of the trigger is a machine gun subject to the GCA and the NFA. Violators face a fine of $10,000 per violation and up to 10 years in prison. Anyone selling them faces up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine or up to a $500,000 fine per organization. The ATF intends to take appropriate remedial action with respect to sellers and possessors of the devices. Current possessors are encouraged to contact the ATF for further guidance on how they may divest possession. If you are uncertain if your FRT is legal or not, please call your local ATF field office. Now, I'd like you to note that there are no public updates or clarifications since that letter came out on March 22nd. I'd also like you to note the vague and ambiguous nature of the letter. There is no clear definition of which FRTs are banned. This is really important. So let's first just agree and get it out of the way. The ATF is using fear mongering to force FFLs, manufacturers, retailers, and possessors to bend to their will without any legal reason to do so. Are we really supposed to believe the ATF doesn't understand the difference between resetting and pulling a trigger? Come on, folks. So let's talk about the big brands out there and what they're doing. So the originator of all of this, the granddaddy of them all, is rare breed triggers. I may or may not have bought some for people that I may or may not know for Christmas right before this ban happened, and that may or may not suck. But let's talk about the rare breed trigger, right? So first and foremost, it does not operate unless you purchase and install a fully auto bolt carrier group. The name full auto scares a lot of people. A full auto bolt carrier group is not illegal to own, possess, or use. It's just a name. It's a bolt carrier group that's just, it's shaped a little bit different. It doesn't make a gun fully auto. Rare breed is really fighting the fight. So when the ATF first announced that they were attacking the FRTs, Rare Breed filed a lawsuit seeking injunctive relief against the ATF. They lost, but their president, who I love this guy's videos, look him up on their website and on YouTube. This guy just continues to promise that they're gonna spend every dollar they can, every minute that they're awake, fighting this ban. I'll also note that their general practice is that they do not store any order information. That's in their normal course of business, so there is nothing that the government can subpoena from them. So if you have a previous order, you may just want to sit on it for now. I'll also note that their general counsel, a very famous Florida attorney named Kevin Maxwell, he brought in two former ATF agents. Now, one of them literally wrote the book on technical branch training to enforce this kind of stuff, okay? Those two ATF agents reviewed the patent. They reviewed the NFA and the GCA. They reviewed an animation of the design of the rare breed FRT, and they inspected an AR-15 with an FRT installed. Both of them determined that this was a semi-automatic trigger and not a machine gun under the NFA and the GCA. That's very important. Now, next, we've got a company called WOT. They call it Wide Open Triggers. Whether or not they're one of the people that are being sued by Rare Breed, I don't know. But I know that Rare Breed they're suing everybody that's copying their design. I can tell you that their website says that the hammer is released by the locking bar, and that hits the firing pin, so it cannot be considered fully auto. But their website stopped selling their WOT trigger, and if you call them, their voicemail says that they cannot sell them due to ongoing legal issues. They don't say if that's the ATF ban or any potential civil lawsuits, so I don't know. Next, we have Franklin Armory. We're going to use them as a contrasting example here. Franklin Armory is they're unabashed in what they do. They make a binary trigger. It is not an FRT. Their website clearly says, quote, "The ATF clearly describes our binary design as it is engineered to fire only one round on pull of the trigger and one round on release of the trigger. So our binary triggers are federally legal and not regulated by the NFA or the GCA." They also clarified that binary triggers are not FRTs, as the ATF letter alleged earlier in the conversation. We've got the National Shooting Sports Federation. So they're an organization that represents firearm dealers, and they're urging the ATF to clarify which brands and models of FRTs are illegal. I'm not a big fan of them doing that because it may be better for the court cases to proceed before the ATF has a chance to respond and clarify. But, they've got to do what they got to do to protect their constituents, essentially. But they do make a really good point that I love. So the ATF has announced that we're in what they call a zero tolerance age, where FFL dealers have there's zero tolerance on what they sell and what they supply, and that gives the ATF carte blanche to come and do these inspections without any kind of announcements and things like that. Essentially, if you're an FFL during zero tolerance time, the ATF gets to come in whenever they want and go through all your stuff. The point that the National Shooting Sports Foundation makes that I really like is that we're in this zero tolerance age, and now they're telling FFL dealers and possessors to call the ATF and ask for guidance, essentially tattle on themselves without any proper legal guidance. So the ATF is telling them, hey, listen, it's zero tolerance. If we catch you with something that we consider illegal, you're done, you're history. But at the same time, if you don't know if it's illegal, call us and tell us that it's in your possession and that you're selling them. Folks, I don't think I need to get into the many different reasons why that poses a lot of issues for a lot of people out there. So let's get to the meat of this. Is the FRT a machine gun under the NFA and the GCA? So all triggers for all semi-automatic weapons have to reset as part of that 8-step cycle. And again, that's usually via a spring. Rare breed, by example, their design resets with a spring and a mechanical assist. So it still resets. It still has the 8-step cycle. The trigger has to be pulled a second time for a second shot. If you take your finger off the trigger, it doesn't shoot. It only shoots again when you pull again. But again, the trigger is being forced to reset against your finger. There is no law in the United States that mentions the rate of fire, only that one bullet for every trigger function may come out. They're not calling this and then this a single trigger action, even though technically under the legal definition it is, because it's part of a single cycle. Sorry, binary trigger manufacturers, but it's the truth. But they are calling this, with more than one bullet coming out, they're calling that more than one, or they're calling that a single trigger function. So the FRT clearly only fires one bullet for every trigger function. So in my legal opinion, no, the FRT is not a machine gun. It's not a machine gun part. It's not a part that makes a machine gun. So, besides my own personal legal opinion, is there any support out there? Yeah. So first, let's talk about the due process clause of the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment says that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment ratified that with those same 11 words. One of the things the due process clause does is it prohibits any law that's vague and or ambiguous. As it stands now, this ban is unenforceable, in my opinion, though I wouldn't encourage anyone to wait to be arrested in order to challenge it. That's never fun. You don't want to get in trouble with the federal government, especially over a part that you might be able to replace down the road for not too much money. I can guarantee you the cost of replacing a rare breed trigger will be a lot cheaper than you would pay me to defend you in federal court. The ATF is an agency, and as an agency, they don't have the jurisdiction to rewrite legal definitions, which were written through federal legislation. So the ATF can't legislate. That's not their job. That's not their function. That would violate separation of powers, which is, again, this constitutional issue. So they have to work within the confines of existing legislation, like the NFA and the GCA. So what they're allowed to do is they're allowed to interpret the law, but that's where their authority under the definitions ends. They don't get to rewrite the definitions, and they don't get to come up with just completely erroneous interpretations. But again, when they do that, that's why we have courts. It brings cases into the court system. It allows the courts to decide whether or not the ATF is right or wrong. I'd also note there's an attorney here in Florida named Ryan Kleckner. He writes a really good blog that I'd encourage people to read. This guy's a former Army Special Operations sniper. He's a firearms industry executive, university lecturer, best-selling author, and practicing attorney. And he agrees with this position. He also has, through his research, has found that the FRT is not a machine gun under any federal law. So what do you do if you're in possession of an FRT? And that's really the big question, right? Because a lot of people were buying these as soon as they heard that there's a rumor that they might be banned. Everybody runs to the store, runs to whatever website they can, they order them, and then the ATF drops this bombshell of a letter. So what do we do, right? So first, don't ever speak to law enforcement, ever, without an attorney present. I'm going to be encouraging the fine folks at FLP to offer coverage to all members that are in possession of some FRTs. I can't guarantee you they're going to give you that coverage, but what I can tell you is that if you're an FLP member and the feds come knocking on your door, FLP will absolutely send what they call a triage attorney out there that'll help you out in this emergency situation. Whether or not they will defend you in court is going to be between you and FLP. But again, I'm going to encourage them based on the vagueness and the ambiguity of the law, that they really need to be protecting our people if they're going to be proponents of the Second Amendment. So don't talk to law enforcement without your lawyer. If FLP doesn't send a lawyer, call one. Do not speak to anyone else, family, friends, Reddit, Facebook, smoke signals, whatever. Don't tell anybody that you've got an FRT. If you bought it from Rare Breed, they don't know. So don't go advertising that you have one. I've seen people posting in comment sections of blogs talking about which FRT they have and whether or not it's legal or not. Don't do that, folks. Go delete those comments if you've already done that. If the feds come knocking on your door, do not open your door. Don't open the door to your house or your business until you see a warrant. This is very important. Now, for FFL, it's a little bit different because we're in zero tolerance phase. They get to inspect you whenever the hell they want. So I wouldn't advise not opening your door for them. You're going to lose your FFL and you may face some other repercussions. But for general, average, ordinary citizens, don't ever open your door for law enforcement unless you see a warrant first. If they do come to your house, do not leave your house. This is really important. So in a lot of cases, no matter what kind of criminal case it is, when they come to your house with a search warrant, if they're not arresting you because they don't have an arrest warrant, a lot of people, they'll walk outside. They want to get some fresh air. They want to call their lawyer, whatever. Once you've left the house, they don't have to let you back in it while they're executing the search warrant. If they're not letting you back in, then you don't get to see what they're doing, what they're tearing apart, and how they're violating the warrant. So I don't ever recommend that you leave the house voluntarily. Make sure you're video recording anything that you can. Never consent to any search of your person or your property. I think most people that have logged in here tonight understand that. Do not sign anything. They're going to push forfeiture papers, consent forms, all kinds of stuff in your face. Don't ever sign any of that stuff. Say, my lawyer will sign those for me. Let me call my lawyer. If your lawyer's not there, document everything. Now, you have to remember, these are the feds. They might come take your phone because they want to know, they want to find a record of where you bought this thing from because they really want to go after the FFL dealer, not you. You're not the guy they want. So while you still have your phone, I recommend that you document everything via text and email live as things are happening. You know, texting your wife, honey, they're searching the sock drawer. Honey, they're trying to open the safe. These are the things you need to be documenting. You need to be sending those as text messages or emails as it's happening. Stay posted. You know, right now, I don't recommend that you contact any law enforcement. You know, the ATF at the bottom of their letter, they say, hey, you know, if you're unsure, call us. Don't do that. Call a lawyer. If you're really worried that you may have one of the some FRTs that are illegal as opposed to some that are not illegal, even though we don't know which are which, if you're worried about it, I recommend that you destroy the FRT yourself. Put it on the garage floor, bang it with a hammer, throw it in the garbage can and be done with it. If you're not worried, put it in your safe and hang on to it until the courts force the ATF to be more clear about what they're describing in their ban. Right now, there's zero legal reason that you should contact the ATF to tell them that you are in possession of an FRT. Their invitation for all of us to call them to, quote, learn how to divest yourself of an FRT is a fishing expedition. They want to know who has them. They want to know how you got them and what you're doing with them. Don't take the bait, folks. So that concludes the the speech portion here. And I apologize. I forgot to remind Ariana to post a picture of the rare breed FRT. Ariana, if you could do that real quick. So what you're seeing, folks, that's the beautiful rare breed FRT. It's got the patent number right there on it, which I love. As you can tell, it's a drop-in trigger replacement. Anybody that's modded an AR-15 style rifle will know, it's what we call a drop-in trigger. So you pull your old trigger mechanism out, you drop that one in. Rare breed also requires that you replace the bolt carrier group with a full auto BCG, and they also recommend that you get a stiffer buffer tube. But other than that, it's essentially drop in. There's some other companies that are making other products. I know Mr. Murphy here is going to address one of the questions that somebody asked earlier about a similar product that has a roller wheel on it. There's some little variations out there. In my opinion, it's just like putting a clock on something. Anybody that was alive in the 50s or 60s, maybe even the 70s, remembers every time we came out with a home appliance, the best way to get a new patent was to do the same thing, but put a clock on it. Somebody made an oven, cool. I'll make an oven, but I'll put a clock on it. Different idea, different product. I get a different patent. That's what some of these guys are doing with FRTs. They're making an FRT, but they're changing one little component. If they do the same thing, they're going to be under the same scrutiny. Also, Ariana, if you don't mind posting the picture of the ATF letter, thank you very much. So this is the actual letter. And again, as you all can see right across the top, it's an open letter to all federal firearms licensees. If you're not a federal firearms licensee, I would argue that you have not been properly noticed of this law, and therefore it is unenforceable. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Ariana. I believe she's going to give you guys a brief sales pitch. Believe me, you want to hear the sales pitch. Firearms Legal Protection is a great company. I do not sell their products. I don't make any money off of their products, but I am a member, and I absolutely love my policy. I keep that in my safe right beside the deed to my house and the title to my car. It's that important of a document. So I would also encourage you to hang on, because after the sales pitch, we're going to have a question and answer portion, which if you've ever been to one of these webinars, those are the most fun times. So Ariana, it's all up to you.
Thank you, guys. That was very helpful information. But like you said, before we get started with the Q&A portion, I'm just going to quickly go over a breakdown of the different Firearms Legal Protection membership plans. But here.
Firearms Legal Protection offers several different memberships to whoever is interested in signing up for legal protection. To start, these plans are divided into individual plans and family plan. Some of the plans, benefits, and prices do vary state by state. For the purposes of this webinar, we will look at our most common plans that are available in most states. The individual basic plan is the best value for what benefits you will receive from our service. This plan includes protection in your state of residence. It also includes uncapped payment of attorney fees for defensive criminal cases and civil cases. There is no maximum cap on what FLP will pay on these cases. Firearms Legal Protection memberships also extend to all legal weapons, so even if you don't have a firearm to protect yourself with, that's okay, because we will cover you even if you use a non-lethal weapon to defend yourself with. With the individual basic plan, you also have Defense of Extreme Risk Protection Orders, also known as red flag laws. All plans have access to 24/7 emergency answered attorney hotline, so no matter the time of incident may occur, you can call our hotline and an attorney will pick up immediately for attorney-client privileges. You also have access to the MyFLP mobile app, and one of our recently added benefits, expungement of criminal record on non-conviction incidents, is also included as a benefit for all FLP membership plans. Members of all plans also receive access to digital content and special discounts. The next step up is the individual premium plan. This plan is great for those who travel across the country, since this plan has nationwide coverage. This plan includes all of the benefits that were just mentioned for the individual basic plan and several more. The individual premium plan includes payment of bail bond premium, which is generally up to $250,000 in most states. This plan also includes payment of expert witness and investigator fees, if either are needed in your case. There is also coordination of counseling support, payment of lost wages if you are out of work during trial, and incident scene cleanup. The individual premium plan also covers payment for incident-related firearm confiscation, so if your firearm is confiscated, then FLP will write you a check for the value of that firearm. Many FLP members want the same protection to also apply to their family, which is why we also offer the Family Premium Plan to choose from. For just a little bit more, you get all the benefits of the individual basic and individual premium plan, which all applies to your spouse and minor children. We define minor children as any child living with you age 17 and younger. Whether you want the most affordable plan that covers all of the basic benefits, or you want something that has a little bit more, like what is offered in our premium benefits, or maybe you want something that offers complete protection to you and your family, Firearms Legal Protection offers several different benefit plans to choose from that will align with what you are needing. If you are not already protected by Firearms Legal Protection, please click the description below this video where we have a special discount to offer our viewers of this webinar. If you have friends or family who also need this protection, feel free to share this code. We want everyone to enjoy the benefits and protection that Firearms Legal Protection membership plans have to offer. Now, let's get back to discussing our webinar topic today.
Okay, so let's get into the Q&A portion. Let's go with...
Yeah, so before we begin, I just want to say I've read a couple of the comments, and I'm really looking forward to answering some of these questions. Paul Thomas, I'll be talking to you here soon. Some people submitted some questions before the webinar began, and we prepared some answers for those. And I hate to do this to Tyler Murphy because I hated it when I was a lawyer in training, but I have to say he's not a licensed attorney yet. He is on my staff, and he's pretty much the smartest human being I've ever met. So I'm looking forward to his answers and his intake on this. But I do have to clarify that any of his answers are not considered legal advice. But I will say I have vetted all the answers myself, and as an attorney, I approve all of the answers. So if there's any follow-up questions after he's gone with these prepared statements, we'll be here for you. If there are any questions we don't have answers for, because this is still kind of a new issue, FLP will provide my contact information. I'll be glad to provide answers once we have answers via email or telephone calls. And once Mr. Murphy's done answering these pre-submitted questions, we'll be answering any live questions that are in the comments. Tyler, it's all you, buddy.
Well, thank you for that introduction. So the first question we have essentially is whether there's a difference between the constant force or using a screw to push the trigger back into the reset location as opposed to a rubber band or a pulling mechanism that would reset the trigger. And I'm not a gunsmith, so I can't speak to the technicals on how precisely these function, but according to the ATF letter, there isn't any distinction whether or not the force reset trigger pushing or pulling would have any effect on their views on whether or not it's a firearm. And to go back onto what Jason was saying with the rubber band trick, although a rubber band in and of itself is not a firearm, it's not intended to be a firearm and not a machine gun. If it's attached to a gun in a way that could make it so it could fire more than one bullet per trigger action, that's one, that's two, then the whole gun itself would become a machine gun. So the second question, Paul's question, are there any considerations regarding LLT modified triggers? The only LLT I'm familiar with is LinkedIn Tactical Technologies, trigger in a bags, which are replaceable triggers that are ready for people to modify their guns. And it's really just used to lighten the pull on the trigger. And there's no real reason to suspect the ATF would find those to be machine guns, because it again, is not causing more than one bullet to be fired per action of the trigger.
It's interesting. You ready for the next question?
Yeah, I'm ready for the next question.
Okay. So Christopher said the ATF's definition of FRT is wrong and a violation of its own definition of a machine gun. What recourses do we have to stop them?
So the only real recourse you have is to fight them in court. And unfortunately, to be able to do that, you have to have standing, which can be somewhat difficult. You have to prove that you have a particularized, illegal wrong committed against you due to this law, and it has to be such a wrong that's not shared, that you do not share with the whole populace as a whole. So really, you'd have to be someone who's arrested as a result of this interpretation of the ATF's interpretation here, or maybe your trigger be confiscated, or if you were in fact a manufacturer who the letter was actually addressed to. Any of those groups, you would probably have standing to bring a suit into court. But if you're just a a secondary seller or a wholesaler, you probably wouldn't, because you're just reselling, and it wouldn't be considered a particularized harm in that circumstance. However, rare breeds, as Jason was saying, is fighting the fight, and they seem to be willing to bring this to court, and they definitely would have standing in the circumstance.
Interesting. Okay. So we have George's question. Can you discuss the brace and SBR rumors? There are ATF rumors that are deciding to brace. The braces will be subject to different regulations and require SBR designation.
So for now, these are just rumors. So it's hard to comment really on just rumors without any concrete information behind it. It would be troubling if the ATF did determine that these should be banned, and as any banning of any firearm accessory. I mean, any firearm accessory is kind of unfortunate. But this was kind of an expected route that they could go down. It's been kind of an expectation in the firearms community that these the pistol grips and the short barreled rifles the ATF has had these in their sights for a while.
The ATF, I feel like, has everything in their sights.
Oh yeah.
So, all right. So Vernon's question is: the Alamo 15 trigger subject to the same scrutiny by ATF, considering they are a different mechanism, roller coaster system? I'm curious if the ATF will rope them into the same case/class of triggers.
So the Alamo 15 it's what is known as a positive displacement trigger. So it is not a force reset trigger, and there's kind of some ambiguity here. It's kind of hard to find people to sell these items. I believe it's manufactured by Big Daddy Unlimited, and they strongly advocate for their legality, and they do continue to sell the Alamo 15, while at the same time they have ceased their FTR shipments. So this suggests that they interpret this to not apply to them. However, the ATF could always change their mind. They could view this differently. Again, the letter that was sent out to the FFLs is very vague. It says some FRTs may or may not be put into this category, which allows them a lot of wiggle room to put in whatever they want, which is arguably why this interpretation would be too void to be enforceable. That no ordinary person could determine what is banned here.
Yeah, that's why we're having this discussion. All right. So Corbett's question: what is the legal difference between an automatic reset versus a binary trigger, and can you get into trouble for just possession of either one versus install trigger sets? I think we kind of briefly discussed this, but it'll be good to refresh.
I'll go over it quickly again. So a binary trigger, you have to, me get my camera so I can see myself. It shoots a bullet every time you pull and release.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a trigger action, and that's a trigger action. So as opposed to a force reset trigger where you can just pull, and the force reset forces the trigger to push forward against your finger, so you're not having to move your finger while it's firing consecutive shots. And that's really the reason why they see it as a firearm, is because you can shoot more than one bullet per movement of your finger. Currently, there's no reason to think that the ATF will go after binary triggers. They, in fact, in the letter called out binary triggers and saying that at least Franklin Tacticals is not a force reset trigger, although they do kind of falsely conflate the two.
On our blog page at firearmslegal.com, we have a binary triggers explained blog, which kind of briefly goes over it as well, a little bit more in detail with some pictures of the different binary triggers, which is a short read, but it's always good to get more information on it as well. Those were good explanations. I'm still learning, so that was good. Gilbert's question, I think this is the last question, but I'll look in our comment section here if there's any other pop-up ones. Are the apex triggers on my MNP 2.0 pistols affected by this?
So apex triggers, as far as I'm aware, are just standard trigger jobs designed to lessen the weight required to fire a bullet. There's nothing that the ATF has done to indicate that they are pursuing any further regulation on just those sorts of trigger jobs. And the fact that it's on the MMP too, it doesn't really matter what gun it's on.
Interesting. Okay. Well, those are all of our pre-submitted questions. There was one in the comments on YouTube from Adventure One. Is there anything supportive gun owners can do to help, or is it just quietly wait and see?
It's kind of difficult. I mean, definitely part of it is you can call your representatives, your state representatives, your federal representatives, let them know this is an important issue to you, that this is an issue that will determine your vote, and likely they will listen. Other than that, you can support other 2A organizations, National Rifle Association, amongst others, that pursue lawsuits that protect our Second Amendment rights. Also, there is a part of a wait and see aspect to this. Likely, I mean, as written, this letter's really on its face unenforceable. What it bans and does not ban is not clear. So there's some optimism to be had whether or not that this could be struck down.
Yeah, and Ariana, to the questions that Tyler answered, I just want to add a couple things. As to the question about the short barrel rifle and braces, did any of us really believe that we were going to be able to trick the ATF into believing that putting a Velcro freaking strap on a buttstock on a short barrel rifle was going to trick them into believing that that is a pistol and not a rifle? Do we really think that's going to last forever? Right now, again, all of it's speculation as to whether or not they're going to start cracking down on the SBRs and the braces or not. So, we really just don't know at this point. But, that's one of those fantasies that just I never anticipated that lasting forever. It's a huge market. I don't want to see it go away. But if you'll remember, when the SBRs and the braces first came out, it was a federal violation if you shouldered that weapon, right? That's changed. It's no longer illegal to shoulder a pistol, short barrel rifle with a brace. But it's the laws are ever changing. Also, as to what Tyler said, when he's talking about the difference between a binary trigger and an FRT, and he talked about with the FRT, you really don't have to move your finger. That's really important to note, because none of the federal statutes talk about finger movement. They don't talk about what your finger does. They talk about actions of the trigger, functions of the trigger. So, we're talking about functions of a finger in reaction to functions of a trigger. Your finger isn't regulated by federal law. The trigger is. And again, under the definition, it's my professional opinion that the FRT is not a machine gun or a machine gun part, however they want to call it, because they're really trying to regulate your finger here, because there's no legal grounds to regulate the trigger itself. Now, as far as some of the questions that have come in, so Paul Thomas, my man, he said, I'm wanting to know if the rare breed FRT is legal or not. Some say yes, some say no. Buddy, I'm with you. I want to know because the ATF hasn't told us. They've given us such a vague description. I shouldn't even say description, because they haven't really given us a description. They've given us nothing to go on, but they've essentially shut these businesses down. So, their action against rare breed seems like they're trying to indicate that specifically the rare breed FRT is illegal. But again, whether or not it's enforceable, I don't know. What I'll tell you is this. Based on the law and based on the descriptions and based on the legal definitions, the rare breed FRT is not illegal. Here's the problem. The ATF looks like they're trying to say that it is. Do you really want to be the one that gets arrested and has to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in bail and attorney fees, because we don't know if FLP is going to cover you yet, to fight this all the way up to a federal court to decide if you're legally possessing it or not? I certainly wouldn't want to be that person. I wouldn't encourage any of my clients to be that person. So for now, again, it goes back to what I was saying at the end of my little speech. We are unfortunately in a sit and wait position. We don't know which ones they're attacking, which ones they're targeting. We don't know which ones they aren't. They literally use the word some FRTs. We don't know which some those are and which some those aren't. So for the time being, we have to sit and wait, unfortunately. So we've got Adventure One saying they're trying to put a speed limit on guns outside the exact mechanical operation. You're exactly right. And, and that's what we talked about earlier. There's no federal law that regulates the rate of fire. There's nothing out there that regulates how fast you can move your finger. I've been at the range beside guys before that I could swear they are full auto, but they're not. They're just really good with their trigger finger, and they've got a light trigger pull. And that kind of comes back to some of the things we were talking about earlier with some of these pre-submitted questions about trigger jobs. At what point under this philosophy, the ATFs following now with FRTs, at what point is a really good trigger job going to become illegal? I know some armors who can really file things down to where you've got, hair trigger would be an exaggeration in the wrong way. I mean, we're talking about you blow on it wrong and the gun's ready to fire. So the reset distance that the trigger has to travel in order to complete that 8-step cycle is so short. At what point does a trigger job become illegal? And I'm hoping that as some cases start to make it into the federal courts based on this FRT ban, that's part of the logic that these attorneys and whoever else is up there arguing these cases start to use, because at some point this becomes the slippery slope argument. Should bump stocks be banned? I don't know. But under the federal definitions, maybe they should. But we allow that maybe ban, and now look at where we're at. Just 2 years later, now we're looking at having semi-automatic triggers banned, and the next thing that comes are these trigger jobs that the other people were asking questions about. We're gonna end up with bans on light triggers. So it's a really scary, slippery slope. Moving down here, waiting for my Florida CCW, then I'll get FLP. Way to go, Cheeky Chops. Let's see. Cheeky Chops again, throwing in second. I'm hoping that you're talking about the Second Amendment. Where's John Correa? Hey, I'd love to see him here. So Adventure One, another good point. That sounds pretty vague and ambiguous. Again, it is, and that's the problem, and that's why even as an attorney that has a lot of experience with firearms, I'm sitting here before you today telling you I don't know what is legal and what is not legal. Let me rephrase that. I don't know what the ATF is considering legal and illegal. I can tell you what's legal under federal law. And that would certainly be just about any FRT that's out there on the market right now. What the ATF is going to enforce, we just don't know yet. If it's decided that FRTs are legal, do you think we'll see a wave of new models from other manufacturers like what happened with braces? Sure, and I hope so. I hope that since Rare Breed has been so generous with their money by defending all of us, I hope that they get to really protect their patent and that they get to make their money back. And I hope people will throw their support to them. And again, I'm not endorsing them. well, I guess I am endorsing them. I didn't come here to endorse Rare Breed, but really these guys are spending, I can't even imagine how much money they're spending fighting the ATF on this issue. And not only does that protect their business, but it really protects all of us, because again, if they're able to stop the ATF in their tracks, they stop that slippery slope that we're all looking at right now with trigger jobs and other things. Where do we go here in questions? Is there anything supportive gun owners can do to help? I think Tyler already answered that. You can contact your state representatives, your federal representatives. You can contribute to firearm legal funds. You could probably contact Rare Breed and ask how you can help them. That's really who I'd be throwing my money and my time at right now, because they're on the forefront. Right now, they have standing to be in federal court. You and I don't, because we haven't been, technically speaking, we haven't been legally affected by this yet. So Rare Breed is really the one that's on the forefront. I'd hate to see them run out of funding to fight this all the way. And I can tell you, legal fees to fight a case in federal court are astronomical. So I would personally contact Rare Breed. Maybe somebody's willing to start a GoFundMe page to help them with their legal funds. I would certainly contribute to anything like that. Tim Webb, why don't you pick and choose which laws to follow, just like us? Hey, I agree. The problem here is that the federal government, when we give them more and more and more and more power, they get to start not only making the law, but interpreting the law. And that's what's happening right now. The ATF is interpreting the law the way the administration wants them to. But let's not be naive about this. The people at the ATF have a job to do. If they didn't have alcohol, tobacco, and firearms to regulate, they'd all be out of the job. We're talking about tens of thousands of Americans that wouldn't have jobs, right? You have to remember, as Ronald Reagan said, the first and primary goal of every bureaucracy is to maintain that bureaucracy. So if the ATF doesn't have new and exciting things to enforce, they're out of the job. So they're always going to be looking for something to come down on you on. Right now, it's FRTs. Tomorrow, trigger jobs, SBRs, braces, you name it. Help desk, still waiting for Rare Breed to come out with a 3-position. I'm with you on that. I can tell you, Franklin Armory, what I really like about their binary trigger is that it came with that red selector plate that goes on the outside of the lower. And it's got the fire and safe positions. But it really mimics that old school Heckler and Koch MP5, the red selector plate. I love the way that looks. I'd love to see Rare Breed do that too. So I'm with you on that. Would it end up as a version 2 of 1986 and allow braces and FRT to be grandfathered in and registered? No, I don't think so. I think the way the ATF has been operating recently is they're attacking things retroactively. They're not looking prospectively. So the laws that we created back then are hurting us now. The laws that we created in the 80s are coming back to bite us in the ass now, because those are the laws that gave them the authority to act retroactively and prospectively however they want. They can go forward in time, they can go backward in time, they can do whatever they want. So those laws, unfortunately, open the gateway to them to act like this. Same thing with the bump stocks. It became federally illegal to possess a bump stock. It wasn't illegal only to buy one after a certain date. They just said, if you own a bump stock, you got to turn it in. It's illegal to own now. So that's the way they're acting now. So if they give enough clarification to, and some courts miraculously uphold their position that FRTs are illegal, no, we're not going to be grandfathered in. It's going to be anybody that owns an FRT is going to be in possession of an illegal firearm or an illegal machine gun, and they're going to have to destroy it or turn it in. Vernon Miller, it doesn't matter that you're an hour late. We're happy that you're here, and this is going to be posted on Facebook. On YouTube, so you'll be able to catch the whole thing. I guarantee you most of it's boring, but I hope you'll still watch, because if I have to be confused, I think that everyone else should be confused too. So Vernon, I'd love for you to be just as confused as I am. Another help desk question. Now I need to install governor on my firearms. I'm with you, brother. That sounds like a truck driver probably submitted that question. Down with the governors. You're a smart man. Thank you. You got to be talking about Tyler and not me because I'm just reading from the script, But thank you from both of us. Jobs created to hinder and burden us taxpayers and non-criminals. Yep, I'm with you. I wasn't saying that there's a place for those jobs. I was just saying that their primary purpose is to defend their own job. And the way they defend their own job is they have to make themselves meaningful and useful. And the way the ATF makes themselves meaningful and useful is they go out and enforce arbitrary laws. Paul Thomas, again, if my FRT is not installed in the rifle, is it still unlawful? Yes. If we were to follow what the ATF said in their letter, then yes, because your FRT isn't considered a part any longer. They have classified it as a machine gun. And again, back to the beginning of the conversation, a machine gun doesn't just mean the gun itself. It could be a little tiny part that can go into a gun to turn that gun into a fully automatic weapon. That part is a machine gun under the law, even though it doesn't fire any bullets in and of itself. So, yes, it'd still be illegal to own, possess, use. It'd become an NFA item, essentially. And, there's another, I don't think you have to dig too deep into the conspiracy theories to get to the point where you say it's just another federal money grab. But they really don't want to ban things. They just want to tax us for them. And the ATS letter itself said that these are now, machine guns classified by the federal statutes and the different various acts. And so therefore they're regulated by the NFA. Any item that's regulated by the NFA requires a tax stamp. So, so there's the argument to be made that they're not even really trying to take these from us or get rid of them. They just want to get paid for every one of them that we own. So, again, I don't think you have to dig too deep to come to that conclusion. Paul Thomas, I hope you're using a fake name. I don't want to know what you possess, and either does the feds that have logged in here to watch this conversation. Adventure One, I can't see because I have a chat bubble, but it says even calling a machine gun something fall under the Hughes Arms Act. Maybe not. It's going to depend on interpretation, how it's used, when it's used, and who's doing the interpreting. I think we're caught up on questions now.
Yeah, he did a great job. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, folks. I tried to run through this as fast as possible. But if there's anything that's unanswered, and I know they're going to post my information, but anybody's got a pen or paper, my email address is Jason, JASON, at Murphy Downs. That's MURPHYDOWNS.com. I'll be glad to provide any answers I can. You can always email me. If you go to our website, murphydowns.com, my cell phone number's on there. You can text me anytime, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that we didn't get to tonight. Thank you, Tim. We appreciate you being here.
Well, I guess that about sums it up for today's webinar. If you guys do have any additional questions, please either email Jason or marketing@firearmslegal.com. But thank you to both of you for those extremely helpful answers to the webinar topic. And Tyler, thank you for that amazing background view that we get to see.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
still jealous. Everybody throw whatever you want at Tyler. He's in his mountain cabin in some state that I won't disclose. But while the rest of us schlubs are working, that guy's in paradise.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well,
Don't
we got
you hate
to
it?
right? Got to view some of it though, so I guess we benefited a little bit. But remember just to click the links in the caption below to sign up for protection at a discounted rate, and to also let us know what you would like to see in any future webinars. We love hearing from you guys, so we want to make sure to keep providing content that you all are wanting to watch. We hope you all have a great rest of your night. And remember, protect yourself will protect you.
Thank you.